The file on humanity was thinner than Velora Thanessi had expected. 211 years of quarantine, and the sum of a civilization fit inside 43 administrative pages. High Arbiter Thanessi of the Tharessi Boundary Enforcement Directorate read through the document a third time while his command vessel, ordered patience, held position at the edge of the Cradle Exclusion Zone. That invisible line, drawn in treaty law and defended by 6 warships, that marked where humanity ended and the rest of the galaxy was permitted to proceed. 43 pages. He had filed more paperwork disputing a mining claim than the Tharessi Assembly had thought necessary to document an entire species. The original quarantine rationale occupied 6 of those pages. Species assessed as developmentally unstable, prone to territorial expansion, insufficient diplomatic framework for interstellar engagement. Then the Kepler Colony incident, 60,000 fatalities, listed under the administrative heading Unregistered Casualties, Boundary Enforcement Action, Year 43. 1 paragraph. No formal protest on file from the human administration after the initial filing, which had been answered with a standard rejection and marked closed. Thanessi noted the absence of protest as evidence of capitulation and moved on. The final section was a behavioral projection, updated 30 years ago, which concluded with confidence, subject species shows no coordinated resistance indicators. Technological development constrained within designated parameters. Recommend continued monitoring, no escalation required. He closed the file and opened the channel to his fleet master. Bring the formation to broadcast position. Standard boundary reminder. Make certain they can see us clearly. 312 million kilometers inside that boundary, in a station drilled into the basalt of a moon the Tharessi had never bothered to assign a name, Commander Adiz Okonkwo heard the broadcast arrive and did not move. She was sitting at a plain worktable in the station's lower operations center, not a tactical throne, not a commander's podium. A worktable with a cold cup of tea and a framed photograph of a woman with her exact eyes who had died on Kepler Colony at the age of 26, 3 years before Adiz took this posting. The broadcast used the same language it always used. The Cradle Exclusion Zone remains in full effect. All human vessels and installations are reminded that technological development beyond designated parameters constitutes a treaty violation subject to immediate enforcement action. Ensign Priya Mehta, at the communications array across the room, looked over her shoulder. Acknowledge, Commander? Yes. Adiz wrapped both hands around the cold cup. And ask if they'd like the coordinates. Mehta's expression moved through several stages in rapid succession. The coordinates of what, Commander? Don't specify. Tell them we're asking whether they'd like to know where to look. The commander's voice had the particular flatness of someone who had long finished being patient and was now simply waiting for the mathematics to agree with her. They'll assume it's a signal error. Thanessi did assume it was a signal error. He ordered a diagnostic and turned to his tactical display, 6 warships arranged in a crescent arc just outside the exclusion zone, their silhouettes sharp against the field of stars. The combined enforcement weight of the 6th Boundary Fleet. Enough firepower to reduce the largest human installation to debris in under 4 minutes. He had never had cause to use that capacity and expected today would be no different. The diagnostic returned clean. The transmission had been deliberate. Fleetmaster Oraveth moved to Thanessi's side. Coordinates of what, Arbiter? Irrelevant. Thanessi's secondary crest, a thin ridge of bioluminescent cartilage that betrayed Tharessi emotional state to those who knew how to read it, pulsed once with mild irritation. Move us to interior broadcast range. I want every sensor array they possess registering our presence. The 6 warships advanced to the edge of inner broadcast range. Not into the zone itself, the Tharessi honored their own treaties with meticulous precision, and held formation. The move was choreography more than threat. In 19 years as High Arbiter, Thanessi had conducted 43 such demonstrations across 16 contained species. They always produced the same result: silence, then compliance, then the quiet resumption of manageable captivity. He opened the primary channel and began the formal reminder. This is a standard demonstration of boundary integrity. The Tharessi Hegemony wishes to remind the human administration that any attempt to develop infrastructure or capability beyond the designated ceiling will be. We heard you the first time. The voice on the channel was calm. Not performed calm, not diplomatic calm, not the strained quiet of something frightened. The calm of someone reading figures off a page they had already committed entirely to memory. Commander Adis Okonkwo. Boundary Defense Directorate. A brief pause, not hesitation, more like a person confirming they have the correct document open. I want to note for your records that this is the 419th formal demonstration conducted over 211 years. I want to further note that we filed 206 formal protests during the first 60 years of quarantine, each answered with form rejections. Another pause. We stopped filing after Kepler Colony. I assume your records show that gap. Thanessetha's crest pulsed again, longer this time. Your protest history is not relevant to the current. Dr. Haraldson, the commander said, and she was no longer speaking to him. In the lower operations center, Dr. Yusuf Haraldson did not look up from his display. He was 63 years old, lean in the way of people who have spent decades prioritizing work over meals, and his hands, resting on the edge of a launch console assembled from components that each, individually, appeared on no prohibited technology list, were completely steady. His grandfather had been a geophysicist on the first Kepler survey team. Had survived only because he was aboard the resupply shuttle when the enforcement action came, and had spent the remaining 4 decades of his life writing equations on actual paper, because the treaty ceiling prohibited the computational architecture those equations deserved. That described, in precise and patient detail, what could be done with mass, velocity, a magnetic accelerator built from salvaged mining equipment, and a surface gravity of 1.3 standard. His father had inherited the paper and refined the atmospheric correction models. Yusuf had inherited both and finished the targeting solutions. All 3 trajectories confirmed, he said quietly. Margin of error within acceptable parameters on all solutions. Thank you. Commander Okonkwo stood. Ensign Meta, tell them to watch the moon. Velora Thanessetha received the message and had a single, clear thought: which moon? There were 11 inside the exclusion zone. His sensors answered the question 0.3 seconds before he finished forming it. 3 objects departed the surface of the 4th moon, not from orbit above it, from the surface itself, moving outward through the zone on trajectories that his tactical system required 4 full seconds to resolve, because the system had been designed to track drive signatures and energy emissions, not the quiet, patient arc of something that needed neither. Tungsten. Solid rods, each approximately 2 meters in length. No propulsion system. No active guidance. No energy signature of any kind. Just mass. Just velocity. Just the irreducible, ancient arithmetic of objects thrown with specific force from the surface of a body with specific gravity at targets a specific distance away, targets that had been measured, modeled, refined, and inherited across 3 generations of people who had nothing left to file and had decided, with the particular clarity of permanent grief, to build instead. The first rod passed the flagship ordered patience at 11 meters. 11 meters. Thanessetha felt his tactical officer go completely still at her station. He felt the hull sensors register the pressure variance. He watched the rod's track continue outward, past the boundary line, through open space, diminishing, and he did not speak. The second rod passed the Enforcer Primaris at 6 meters. The third crossed the measured response at 14. All 3 embedded themselves in the rock of an unnamed asteroid 300,000 kilometers beyond the zone's outer edge, in exactly the location that a geophysicist's handwritten equations had predicted they would land. Equations written in the years after Kepler, on paper, with ink, by a man whose hands shook every time he calculated what force would have been sufficient to justify 60,000 names. Silence took the command deck. Not the silence of shock. The silence of a room where every person has arrived at the same understanding simultaneously and no one has yet decided what the understanding means. Oraveth's voice was careful. Almost gentle. They were fired from inside the zone. Yes, Tharessi said. They crossed the boundary line. Yes. We prohibited advanced propulsion. Guidance arrays. Energy-based kinetic delivery systems. Oraveth stopped. Recalculated. We prohibited the platforms. We did not prohibit, he could not finish the sentence for a moment. We did not prohibit throwing. The word landed in the room with a weight disproportionate to its size. Arbiter. His tactical officer's voice was very controlled. I am running the trajectory origin back. The launch structure appears to be a magnetic accelerator, components sourced from mining equipment and atmospheric processing salvage. There is no prohibited assembly in the construction. None. Every component, individually and in combination, falls beneath the treaty ceiling. She looked up from her display, and her expression carried something Tharessi had not seen on a Tharessi officer's face during a boundary demonstration: uncertainty. They built it from nothing we thought to forbid. Tharessi stared at the trajectory lines traced across his display. 3 clean arcs, beginning inside the cage, crossing the boundary without propulsion or guidance or any technology the treaty had bothered to name, and ending precisely where they had been intended to end, not in his warships, but close enough to his warships that the distance itself was a sentence. He opened the channel. Commander Okonkwo. Still here, she said. Those rods could have struck our vessels. Yes. You chose those margins deliberately. We calculated them to the centimeter, she said, and her voice had not changed in texture or temperature since the conversation began. Dr. Haraldson's grandfather did the foundational work. His father corrected for gravitational variance at operational range. Dr. Haraldson completed the targeting solutions. The 3 of them, across their lifetimes, produced results accurate to 11 meters at 300 million kilometers. She paused. We wanted you to understand that the margin was a decision, not a limitation. We chose 11 meters. We could have chosen 3. Tharessetha's secondary crest had gone fully flat, not the flat of calm, but the flat of a biological system that had simply run out of threat response gradient. In 19 years he had never encountered a situation that did not resolve by escalation. He did not know how to escalate against a decision. What do you want? He said. The same thing we have wanted for 211 years, Adiz said. A conversation. Not a demonstration. Not a form rejection. Not demonstration 420 of a capability we have always known you possessed. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. You have known for 2 centuries that you could destroy us. We have known it as well. 60,000 people at Kepler Colony made certain we understood it with precision. The channel held a moment of silence that neither of them moved to fill. We stopped filing protests because protests assume the other party is listening. We started building because building assumes nothing except that the physics functions. And the physics, she said, functions. Tharessi looked at his display. At the 3 tracks. At the dead asteroid beyond the boundary line that now held, embedded in its rock, 3 tungsten proofs. Each one a sentence in a language assembled from grief and paper and inherited purpose, written across 3 human lifetimes and delivered without a single violation of a single treaty provision. They had not broken the quarantine. They had not crossed the line. They had simply demonstrated, with the patience of people who had nothing left to petition and had decided to calculate instead, that the zone was a boundary in both directions. And that what lived inside it could reach anything outside without leaving, and had chosen, in the specific and measured language of a species that understood the difference between a weapon and a proof not to. "I will need to contact the assembly," Thanessi said. "Take all the time you need," Adis said. "We have had 211 years of practice at waiting." The Tharessi Assembly convened an emergency session 14 hours later. A formal negotiation framework was established within 6 days. The Cradle Exclusion Zone was not dissolved, it remained on every official map, a historical notation, a line that still technically existed in the administrative record. But the discussions that followed were conducted at a table. In the lower operations center, Adis Okonkwo sat down and finally drank her tea. It was cold. She drank it anyway. Across the room, Ensign Meta had her face turned away, and Dr. Haraldson was sitting with his hands in his lap, looking at nothing in particular, the way a person looks when they have finished something that took their whole life and are not entirely certain what to do with the quiet. On the wall behind the commander's table, framed in plain steel, was a list of 60,000 names in typeface small enough that they all fit. They did not celebrate. This had never been built for celebration. It had been built for the names, because the names had not asked for revenge or release, they had only ever asked to matter. And the rods had delivered exactly that, not escape, not retribution, but the permanent, gravity-confirmed, mathematically irrefutable fact that 60,000 people had been remembered long enough, and precisely enough, and patiently enough, to be heard. The cage was still there. The galaxy had simply learned what the cage contained. And what the cage contained had always known that grief, given sufficient time and sufficient reason, learns to calculate.